Okay, I've got a quiz for you. I'm going to give you two lists of characteristics, and I want you to think about which list, A or B, most characterizes Jesus Christ. Okay, so here they are. There's list A: competence, power, proving oneself. Okay, now in list B, you got things like love, relationships, nurturing, sharing, relating. Okay, you got it? Got your answer locked in? Okay. Who thinks, and raise your hands here, who thinks list A more characterizes the values and life of Christ? No one? Okay, I got one back there. I see that hand. Thank you. Okay. How about list B? Okay. All right. Now, I pulled a fast one on you here. You know where I got those two lists? Out of the first chapter of the book, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. Yeah. List A is what guys value the most and are most like, and list B is for women. No, don't clap. You just called Jesus a girl, okay? You can't do that. Yeah. And now here's why I bring this up. Is because oftentimes we think of Christ as being kind of docile and sweet, and we look at the things that he taught about love and that sort of thing, and we think that, that must be, the total description of Christ. And the reality is, there would be characteristics from both of those lists that would be very important to describing the values and character of Christ. And here's the point I want to make out of this, is that too often people think of Jesus as just this innocuous teacher who taught, be nice to your neighbor. But here's the deal. Here we're here on Palm Sunday. In Rome, no one ever got crucified for being a nice guy. Okay? You didn't get crucified for that. Here's what you have to know. There were agendas that were being lived out by the powers that be in Jesus' day. Rome had an agenda. Rome had an agenda for the people of the world in that day. And their agenda was subdue them and conquer them and take whatever we want from them. They are just vassals that we take from. They're just an opportunity to get what we want from those people. We conquer them and we take what we want. The religious leaders, the Sanhedrin and the Pharisees, they had an agenda. And their agenda for the people was, they're a stepping stone for building us up. We will crush them under the weight of a religious system that separates us from them in a way that builds us up and makes us feel holy and closer to God. But we do it by separating ourselves from the people. And so they had this kind of deeply judgmental system that they imparted that was a part of their agenda. Now, Jesus had an agenda, didn't he? When Jesus came to this world, he had an agenda, and he describes it in a number of different ways. But in John, the Gospel of John, chapter 10, I want you to hear what he says, because he gets at his agenda here. He says this: the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy, right? There are some agendas in this world, and they're all about stealing and destroying, okay? He says, I have come, here's his agenda, I have come that they might have life and have it to the full. My agenda is not to beat people up. It's not to take advantage of people. It is to set them free. It is to set them free from their sin. It is to set them free from the powers of this world so that they can be all they were created to be by their Creator. See, his agenda was wildly different. It was to build people up. It was to set them free. It was to let them know how much they are loved by God. It was to let them know the power they had and what it meant to be a follower of God, to become all they were created to be as the Imago Dei. Now, can you see how that agenda could make the other powers to be a little nervous? They didn't want people walking around thinking they were the Imago Dei. They didn't want people walking around thinking they were free and that they were loved by God and that they had power and that they were created to be something special in this world, because that agenda was in direct competition with the agenda of beating them down and taking and conquering them, right? So can you see how Jesus maybe was a little different than what we think? It was his agenda in this world that got him killed. And what I want you to understand is that the way Jesus lived out his agenda points to his character. And here's the character I want to point to that we don't often see in Scripture, but it's there. Okay? And it's because we kind of have a picture of Jesus that can be a little wimpy at times. Okay? Jesus was no wimp. All right? He had the heart of a warrior and the soul of a servant. And that's what I want you to get out of today. Jesus had the heart of a warrior and the soul of a servant. Okay? And so let's explore that a little bit here, because it comes out in Scripture maybe more than you realize. Of course, in Christ's day, Herod the Great controlled that entire region. He died, and 3 of his sons ended up getting the vast amount of control of what Herod had once controlled. And Herod named all of his sons Herod, kind of like George Foreman. You know, George Foreman, he named all of his boys. There's George and George and George and George, okay? Well, Herod named all of his sons Herod. So you kind of have to go off of their middle names. And they were all very ruthless guys. Herod Archelaus was the one that had control over the area of Jerusalem. And so let me give you a little historical background on 2 of them, and then I want to point you to some passages in Scripture that maybe you'll see with fresh eyes if you understand the historical significance that Jesus was speaking these words in. Herod Archelaus was ruling that area right after his father died. And then there came a time for him to be officially appointed the tetrarch over Jerusalem and kind of the surrounding area. And to do that, he had to go through this process, part of which was to go to Rome and actually before Caesar kind of go through these discussions and this whole deal. So Herod Archelaus goes off to Rome to be officially appointed as king. And when he does, there's a group of Jews, and the Jews hated him. The leaders in Jerusalem, the Jews, they hated Archelaus. They hated him so much, they sent a delegation of 50 of the most prominent leaders, Jewish leaders in all of Jerusalem. This delegation of 50 men went to Rome, and in this hearing, they stood up and said, please do not make this man our king. Put us under anybody else, but not this guy. Give him some other region, but not Jerusalem. We don't want him. And you know what Caesar did? Made Herod Archelaus king anyhow. And they all go back to Rome, and guess what? They don't get along so well when they get back, when they get back to Jerusalem. In fact, Herod Archelaus brings those 50 men, 50 of the most prominent men in all of Jerusalem, has them come before them and has them murdered right before his eyes. Kind of a little lesson here. I don't want people opposing me around here, okay? So now, keep that in mind, and here's Jesus. He teaches, he's teaching a parable, and he weaves this kind of story into this parable. Over in Luke chapter 19, verse 12, he says this. He said, a man of noble birth went to a distant country to have himself appointed king and then return. Now remember, the audience here, they know all about this thing with Herod Archelaus, and they're going, distant country, appointed king, and then comes back. Sounds a little familiar, okay? Jesus goes on. Verse 14, but his subjects hated him and sent a delegation after him to say, we don't want this man to be our king. And you can just see everyone in the audience going, Jesus, maybe you shouldn't bring this up. Maybe, he's kind of touchy, okay, right? And he says, he was made king, however, and returned home. And then Jesus kind of has this little lesson that he weaves through. And here's how he ends this parable. He comes to the end, he says, but those enemies of mine who did not want me to be king over them, bring them here and kill them in front of me. And so everyone there understands who Jesus is really talking about, right? There's, if you were living in that day, you'd go, I don't think, is this really smart to be talking like this? Because, he doesn't like this when this sort of thing goes on. And what you have to understand is what Jesus is doing here is he's using Herod Archelaus as it's kind of an illustration here. And what he's saying through this is he's saying, if a psychopathic, insecure killer, we can learn a few things from him. Imagine what you can learn by following a God who is true and noble and who is a real leader and not like this insecure psychopathic killer over here, okay? And you just realize there's a kind of boldness to Christ that he taught with that made a lot of people nervous. One of the other tetrarchs, son of Herod, his name was Herod Antipas, and he had a number of things going. He got into real girl trouble at one point. He had this terrible rivalry with a nation right next to them called the Kingdom of Nabatea. And he and the King of Nabatea never did get along much. And Rome's like, you all better get along. You better work this out. You better work this out. And so finally, to work it out, one of the ways they would do this is that the King of Nabatea gave his daughter in marriage to Herod Antipas. And they all got along. All worked out great, except for his daughter, of course. This scumbag, okay? Didn't like it much. But then, not long after that, Herod Antipas decided, I really don't like her too much. I think I'm going to marry this girl over here. And so he goes to marry this other girl. And that girl, surprise, surprise, says, well, I don't like you having this other wife. I don't want to be wife number 2. You need to get rid of her, okay? And so Herod Antipas goes, sure, I'll get rid of her. Well, what do you think she did? She went running home back to dad, who was the king of Nabatea, who decided, I think we're going to have a big fight over this. And so the nation of Nabatea goes to war with Herod Antipas's area. And guess what happens? The king of Nabatea takes 20,000 troops into battle. Herod Antipas says, I'll take 10,000 troops into battle. Guess who wins? Yeah, do a little math on this. Let's see. I have twice as many guys as you. Herod Antipas got his clock cleaned in the battle, almost lost his kingship over this. Rome looked at this and said, what kind of dim-witted idiot takes 10,000 troops into battle against a guy with 20,000 troops? Do we really want him leading part of our nation? I don't know about this, okay? It was a huge fiasco and a huge embarrassment to Herod Antipas. So, one day Jesus is teaching. And he says, and this is over in Luke, and he says, hey, I got a great little story. How about this one? Okay, this is in Luke chapter 14, verse 31. He says, and he's teaching this little thing about discipleship, and he goes, or here's a good one, or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king, just hypothetically, okay? Will he not first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men, right, to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? Wow, how smart would that be, right? And you just realize, he's just saying, what kind of pea-brained, dim-witted, idiot, sprocket head would go into battle with 10,000 guys when his enemy has 20,000, right? And you can just see everyone around him going, Jesus, ixnay on the inke, Isase, just don't bring this up. Herod Antipas is a little sensitive about this. And what Jesus is saying is, this guy's not a real king. He thinks he may be big stuff, but he's really very stupid, okay? At one point in Luke, there's a point where there's a group of Pharisees that actually come up to Jesus and they say, you've got to get out of here because Herod, and they're speaking of Herod Antipas at this point, he's coming to kill you. Well, no kidding, okay? Because you keep calling him out. You keep undermining his kingdom with all this talk about the kingdom that you're going to bring. Jesus had the heart of a warrior and the soul of a servant. Jesus acted like he wasn't afraid of anything. Jesus acted like he was the one that was more powerful, and Herod Antipas and Herod Archelaus and Rome really were the weak ones. He was a bold guy. See, that's what got him crucified. But Jesus had an agenda. And he was going to live it out. And you can just picture the disciples, and they're going, why do you keep doing this? You keep dragging us into these things. Because, right, Jesus is saying, you come and follow me. Here's how you live. I want you to live with the heart of a warrior and the soul of a servant. And he keeps dragging them in. And, there's moments when the disciples, they get a little skittish. And, right, we understand why now. because Jesus had the heart of a warrior. I kind of got a lesson with this with my dog, Mal. I told you about my dog, Mal. He's a runner. He's also a little bit of a fighter. We've had some issues with Mal because he can get a little with other dogs. And I go jogging in the morning oftentimes, and I'll go running with Mal. And I've really been working on him to just kind of mind his manners and not pick fights with other dogs. And he's getting pretty good at it. But about a week and a half ago, my wife said, I think about a week and a half ago, I'm finishing up my run. I'm coming home and I'm running with my dog, Mal, and I've got him on the leash, and I look up and around the corner come two dogs, both bigger than him, and they're all, and they are charging us. They escaped their yard. They're not on a leash. Their owner's not around. They are just running full blast straight at me. And I'm like, ah! And of course I look down at Mal, and Mal's like, oh yeah, baby. And I'm like, I can't believe this is happening, and I'm like, sit Mal. And he's having none of it. He's like, I got a good fight and it's coming right to me right here. And so these dogs come, and no kidding. And like the adrenaline in me just went, and I'm sitting there, I'm trying to hold him back. And at the last minute, we're on the side of the street, at the last minute, his leash breaks. And now I've got three dogs not on a leash, and it's mayhem. And so I'm like, no! And as he breaks loose from his leash, it's like he got launched off of an aircraft carrier. He's all, and he goes flying by the first dog like two fighter planes, just like this. And the one dog's coming right at me. And just as they go to pass each other, Mal reaches over and goes, and just sinks his teeth in the back of the neck of this other dog that's coming right at me, and I didn't know what to do, so I punched it. Bam! I nailed this dog right in the side of the head, and it just, yeah, adrenaline is a great thing when you need it. Bam! I hit the other, and Mal stopped, when he latched onto it, it kind of slowed him down, and I'm chasing Mal, and as Mal kind of stops, I punch this dog. I end up landing on the back of Mal like he's a horse or something. I tackle him to the ground, and I reach around, and the other dog's right there, and I go, and this dog sees, my buddy just got bit and punched, and I go, all air, just, whoosh. He just goes, I ain't having none of you, dude. So it's just like all, whoosh, and I look back to hit this dog again, and he's all, just fine. So I look back at the brown dog, and he's like, I think I've had enough. I'm out of here. He turned around and ran off as fast as he came. And I look back over at this dog, and the whole time I'm on Mal, and he's all, and I'm on him, and this dog gets up and is just like, I'm going with my buddy. Whoosh. And it was over that fast, and I looked up and I realized we are in the middle of the street. And I'm on top of a dog. And I'm looking over, my neighbors. Hey, yeah, that's okay. Don't worry about me, just on a little run this morning with Cujo. And then I'm like, Mal, what did you get me into here? And then I was like, but it was pretty cool. I punched a dog, okay? And I know I'm kind of comparing Jesus to a dog, but for good reason here, okay? In many respects, Jesus, he was so bold and brazen. He never backed down from the Romans or the religious leaders. Think of all the moments in Scripture where the religious leaders come at him, either to kill him or trap him or defame him. And Jesus it's like he never backed out of a good fight. And you can just see the disciples. Jesus, remember, we don't have an army. Okay, they do. But Jesus had the heart of a warrior and the soul of a servant. And he asked his disciples to follow him. Now, I want us to examine just for one moment this idea that Jesus had the soul of a servant. They're coming up on Palm Sunday. It's almost Palm Sunday, and Jesus knows what he's about to do. And of course, he's been acting this way for 3 years, and the disciples have this impression that he's going to overthrow the Roman government, and he's going to overthrow the religious system of the Pharisees and the Sanhedrin. And of course, Jesus his agenda is a little different. His agenda isn't to conquer and subdue. His agenda is to win over hearts and set people free. And see, that's why Jesus would look at this and say, those leaders, they're nothing. The only way they get control is by conquering. I will have people who will follow me because they'll give their heart to me. See how different that is? Because I'll be the kind of leader that will set them free. I'll set them free from their sin, and I'll set them free to become all they were created to be by God. See, that's the soul of a servant. So, Palm Sunday's coming up. A couple of the disciples, they were getting ready to take over Rome this week, and two of them say, can we be on your left hand and your right hand? Can we be the number 1 and number 2 guy? That's what we want to do. And of course, that makes a few of the other disciples indignant. But I want you to catch how Jesus handles this. This is over in the book of Matthew. And so they make this request, and Jesus begins to address it. And it says this in verse 24 of chapter 20. It says, when the 10 heard about this, they were indignant, right? And of course, they're going, hey, why do you want to be above us, right? You're wanting to be great, and you're wanting to be above us. It says with the 2 brothers, verse 25, Jesus called them together and said, and I love how Jesus handles this. He's not rebuked these two. He's not rebuked these two. Here's what he does, verse 25. Jesus called them together and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. Their high officials exercise authority over them, right? That's their agenda. They conquer, they subdue, they're takers from the people, okay? He says, verse 26, not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great. Now, catch that for just a moment. Jesus never says it's bad to want to be great. He doesn't say they want to be great. We want to be on your one on your right, one on your left. We want to be great. And Jesus, he doesn't rebuke them for wanting to be great. Okay? Because the heart of a warrior is to always be great. What Jesus does here is redefines what greatness in his kingdom is really all about. Look what he says. He says, not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to be great. Boys, you want to be great? You want to be great? Here it is. Whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. And catch this. And to give his life as a ransom for many. See, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give my life as a ransom. What I will conquer is a kingdom much greater than the kingdom of Rome. I'm going to capture the kingdom of the human heart by setting it free through my sacrifice. I'm going to give my life. Friends, that's the heart of a warrior. To sacrifice your life for another. That is the heart of a warrior and the soul of a servant. That's why he picked all those fights. It was for you and it was for me. And he asks his disciples, follow me in this. Follow me in this. So here's my challenge to all of us. Okay, here's my application. If you're a follower of Christ, live like you mean it. Live like you serve and follow one who has the heart of a warrior and the soul of a servant. You let that be your model for how you live. And if you're here this morning and you're saying, I'm not a Christian, but I'm kind of checking this out. You know what? A great Sunday for you to be here on. Because this is your chance to see what this Jesus guy is like and to begin to say, is that the kind of God I would follow? Is that the kind of God that I'd bow before and give my allegiance to? See? So here's the challenge. If you're a follower of Christ, live like it. Live like it. And I've got 3 areas that I just kind of want to roll through and kind of ask you this question. What would it look like to live like you mean it in these 3 areas? And the first one is this: live like you mean it in your financial life. What would that look like to live like you mean it in your financial life, right? I think part of it is you're not going to let you're not going to let money become a God in your life. You're not going to worship it because you've got the heart of a warrior and the soul of a servant. You're going to say, the God I serve is Jesus Christ. That's the one, that's the God I worship, not money. And so I'm not going to lift money up in my life and worship it and dedicate my life to it. Rather, it's going to be a tool that I will use. And on the flip side of that, it means that we don't go the way of the prodigal God. We don't just go rampant with money in such a way that we spend more than we have, right? I mean, that would be, and in our day, we did the lesson on the prodigal son, and remember the prodigal son goes and takes his entire inheritance and just wastes it away. In our day and age, we can do that really easy with credit cards. We can go out and just run up credit cards. And you know what? When we do that, when we spend more than we take in, and that's crushing, isn't it? That's not freedom. See, that's not living like you mean it. Maybe living like you mean it in your financial life is saying, I'm going to do something with my I'm going to further God's kingdom. I'm going to live like I've got the soul of a servant, and I'm going to make deliberate choices with my finances and my time to make a difference in this world for God's kingdom. Okay. Second area, live like you mean it in your sexual life. And I want to be careful with this because sometimes in the church we think of our sexual lives as being, it's taboo, that's bad, bad. But here's the deal, right? We looked at this when we looked at Genesis 1 last fall. God made you and me as sexual creatures. It's a good thing. But we can mishandle it, can't we? There's lots of ways we can mishandle it. So what would it look like to live like we mean it in our sexual lives, right? And oftentimes, right, there's this tendency in all of us, I'm just going to kind of go my own way. Man, I'm not married yet, but we're both adults, and there's kind of this relationship I've got going here, and it just, this is really what I want to do. And yet in your conscience, God is saying, no. This sex thing works best inside of a relationship of permanence and commitment that is protected in that relationship. And when your sexual life is exercised in that relationship, it's a great thing. And so you kind of got this choice. Am I going to live like I mean it in my sexual life, or will I kind of go my own way? And my challenge is, God's the one that made you. He knows what's best for you. And where has God ever done anything in your life that in the end wasn't the best thing for you? Because that was his agenda. His agenda was the opposite of all the other agendas. His agenda was to set you free, to help you become all you were created to be. And the question for me, and the question for you is, will I trust him? Will I really apply that belief to my sexual life? Right? Okay. Third area, live like you mean it when you worship. Live like you mean it when you worship. When you come here and we sing these songs, don't just sing songs. When you look at the words of those songs, if they're true, declare them. Make them a song of prayer to God. Think about those words. And don't just sing them because you like to sing them or, they're just enjoyable for you. And I hope you do enjoy them. But first say, God, you're the audience. You're the audience. And I'm doing something for you in these moments. I'm declaring these things. I'm saying things because of my devotion to you. Because God enjoys it. And here's the other challenge I'll give you with this. Let your worship be something beyond these walls. Okay? Your worship, live like you mean it when you're out of here. It's worship God at work, at play, in your family, wherever you are, you will have opportunities to worship God. You may not be singing, and some of you just go, I'm not really into the singing thing anyhow. Well, you know what? That's okay, because you can worship God in a multitude of ways. In fact, I love to worship in here, but my best moments of worship really aren't in here. You know where my best moments of worship are? Last service, they said Starbucks. No, the answer's not Starbucks. Although I've had some good moments in Starbucks. For me, and this is just me, and I know I'm a desert rat, but when I'm in the ocean, oh my, when I'm in the ocean, especially on a surfboard, I have some of my best worship moments. I look at that ocean, I feel those waves, and those are moments that I just say, God, you are so creative. What kind of God you must be to think up oceans and waves. I think waves were one of God's best ideas, okay? And when I'm riding one of those waves, that physical experience for me, that's an act of worship for me, to adore my God. What areas can you worship your God outside of here? And you know what's beautiful? Is when you take those worship experiences and then you bring them back in here. And as a congregation, we don't just worship in this moment, we're bringing those other moments into this. See, friends, we follow and we serve a God who has the heart of a warrior and the soul of a servant. And because of that, he rescued us. He rescued us from our sin, and he rescued us so that we could be set free to become all we were created to be. So I want you to think about that kind of God. And I want us to sing together this song. It's called Rescue. I want us to sing this song about he is our rescuer. And as you sing this, I want you to think about Christ in a fresh way. I want you to think about him as a warrior and as a servant, and what it means now as a rescued one to follow him. So sing this song, and I'm going to come back and